You young African, we found you. We found you. I begin my presentation by paraphrasing the now famous words spoken by Alex Haley upon finding the family of Kunta Kinte, because this level of discovery is still not common for many, if not most, African Americans all these years later. Why is this so? Because the effort required to bridge the gap between the African and African American, a gap created by centuries of exploitation, enslavement, structural dismemberment, and in some cases, historic subterfuge, has combined to create a very formidable brick wall, which now necessitates the cooperation and collaboration of many diverse parties in order to achieve success in these modern times. It doesn't matter what the king, the pope, or even the various African tribal leaders did or didn't do. We are now all, including those represented in the slide and those not shown, we are now all in this thing we call life, as a famous recording artist once said. We're in this together. Fortunately, for a number of us, there exists a healthy cadre of like-minded researchers and discoverers who have been able to put aside what makes them different and focus on what they have in common. That common interest is to find out from whence they came and to learn how they relate to their fellow woman and man. And so it is that 5 times removed, the son of a formerly enslaved and the son of a former slave owner can travel together down the road of discovery, helping each other along the way. Oh, what a time it is to be a citizen scientist and genealogy researcher, coupled with all the available tools and resources that are at one's disposal to be able to go places and discover things that were not possible to do before. I submit to you, these are the good current days, as I'm sure many of you viewing would agree. I would also argue that this current window of opportunity is a period that we should not take for granted or squander. There are no guarantees that our current research environment will be as plentiful in the future as it is right now. Case in point, the success of my recent distant African cousin discovery nested in part on the capability of being able to combine sibling summation techniques, I'm one of 5 siblings, with raw DNA data downloading use to GEDmatch for chromosome browsing analysis, tipped or triggered by initial querying of distant small segment DNA matches down to the 6 and 7 centimorgans level, in order to discover deep ancestral connections, which, based on my genetic background, then had a chance of linking me back to distant African relatives. A centimorgan cheat sheet I used, by the way, there are many more detailed, comprehensive resources that are available for use and study in this area, but this method works well for me. This sheet gives me some general idea regarding how far back in time I would likely need to travel and how many generations would likely be involved in this time travel as well in order to potentially achieve my objective. Being from Maryland, one of the original 13 colonies, I'm interested in slave vessels like the Margaret, which came from Sierra Leone in 1718 and arrived in the Annapolis area with 117 enslaved survivors on board. I'm interested in the slave vessel, the Generous Jenny, which came from Ghana in 1720 and arrived in Hollywood, Maryland on the Patuxent River with 218 enslaved survivors on board. Like Alex Haley was, I'm interested in the slave vessel, the Lord Ligonier, which came from the Gambia in 1767 and arrived in Annapolis with 96 enslaved survivors on board, including one individual now known around the world as Kunta Kinte. The records are available. The English and the Italians kept very good records of their activities. These are real numbers. These are real people. And with enough due diligence and research and perhaps a little bit of good fortune and luck, our descendants can be identified, located, and found. This is the time frame I need to study. The number of generations I have to go back and the associated centimorgan yields that these distant relatives would have all point to being under 10 centimorgans. Let's talk about sibling summation in these small DNA segments. If you are able, using effective sibling summation techniques reduces the odds of you relying on a false positive matches. If you can observe and study these matches inside a chromosome browser and achieve triangulation with the people you are trying to study, three or more parties all matching on the same chromosome and same location, you can greatly bolster the validity of your findings. Having five matching siblings to study as your core is a true force multiplier. We function and operate via DNA as separate as the five fingers, but as united as the hand. Put another way, we each swim in our own lake, but collectively form to comprise a great networked system. As the manager of all this assembled DNA, let's face it, five is better than one. Sibling summation allows for the formation of a DNA superkit. Each sibling received 50% of their DNA from our mother and 50% from our father. Our sibling DNA is not identical. It is, in fact, similar, but distinguishingly still unique in each instance. Here's an example of some of that force multiplication. Let's take my paternal first cousin Butch as an example. In looking at my DNA results by evaluating Butch in a chromosome browser from DNA Painter, we might yield about 25 to 30% of the shared DNA that we have in common, just the two of us. If I step back from that and reapply Butch's DNA to all five siblings, in that scenario, we're now going to yield 85 to 95% of that paternal DNA. Because again, he's going to match each of us, but he's going to match us differently. And we're going to be able to see those differences we can add together and look at more comprehensively in a chromosome browser. We can do the same thing on my maternal side. If we take my first cousin Jamie and do the same thing, looking just at me, we might get a 25 to 30% return under those circumstances. But if we look at Jamie against all five siblings, now we're looking at again an 85 to 95% return, looking at all of the DNA that Jamie matches against all of the siblings. So you can actually reconstruct or recover your parents' DNA through this process if you've got 3, 4, 5 or more siblings and first cousins from both your mother and father's side. You can reconstruct the DNA of your parents even if you didn't have the opportunity to test them when they were here. That's a pretty powerful thing to be able to do. And this example demonstrates just one of many powers of incorporating sibling summation, if you can, into your efforts. As a DNA researcher, you can supercharge your analysis. If you have a healthy bench to draw from, i.e., lots of cousins who have tested, preferably with a variety of testing companies, and you use that deep bench to move past your tested first cousins, pull beyond your second and third cousins to go even further and hunt deep, that's when exciting things can happen. First, second, and third cousins are invaluable in studying your most recent ancestors. But if you want to go deeper than that, if you want to find your family's Kunta Kinte, you've got to be able to go beyond that level to your fourth, fifth, and sixth cousins. That deep research becomes critical. It's essential if that's what your objective is. With that said, let's now take some time to reinvent the wheel. Well, maybe not reinvent, let's repurpose this wheel. I'll start by positioning myself in the center. In this position, I will be able to observe 360 degrees of activity. Next, I'll add my parents. From here, I can test to determine my own Y and mitochondrial origins. Skipping forward a few steps, using our very extensive cousins network and their associated Y and mitochondrial DNA results, we can reveal a number of deep ancestral roots along a number of various family lines. Let's also add to the equation for reference the grandparents in each of the four major quadrants. If you can begin to successfully separate your family DNA matches as best you can into their major individual quadrants, all sorts of potential goodness begins to come into view. Either from the comic books or from the movies or both, many people remember or know about Marvel's Fantastic Four. Let me suggest to you today that each of us has our own version of the Fantastic Four. I'm talking about our grandparents. Allow me to explain. If you want to uncover the mystery behind a given DNA match, I first examine my sibling summation group. How many of us five actually match the individual in question? Then I check nieces and nephews, quickly followed by checking first cousins on my paternal side and first cousins, including my aunt, on my maternal side. Then I jump to my superheroes, my Fantastic Four, to see what insights they can bring to the matter. In this instance, I have some activity within the five siblings and also one nephew. No activity on my paternal first cousin side, but I do have activity on my maternal cousin side. Then I jump to the Fantastic Four to see if there's any quadrant activity. Third cousin matches aligned to my mother's father provide a roadmap upon which area to travel down further. In this case, the Ott family match takes my Jordan family across the color line and ultimately leads all the way back to Samuel Silas Jordan, who came to Jamestown on the Sea Venture along with his famous shipmate, John Rolfe, in 1610. In this example, I've got significant activity within the sibling five, as well as among the nieces and nephews. There are several paternal first cousin match results, which point me in a direction to next check the Fantastic Four quadrants, particularly on the paternal side. Matches in my father's quadrant, coupled with our paternal activity, validate Schreiber and Spears family connections, which run all the way back to James Victor Schreiber and the Sotterley Plantation in Southern Maryland. So effective use of one's own Fantastic Four can help you to better cluster and ultimately resolve many of your family's queries. There are, however, an occurrence which is very prevalent in Southern Maryland. We're talking about endogamy. This is where in a given area, everyone is related to everyone else. Regarding three of my four of my grandparents, they are all raised and brought up within 15 miles of one another in St. Mary's County. From Hollywood to Leonardtown to Valley Lee, just about everyone was related to everyone else. In this example, checking into the Fantastic Four alone will not provide instant clarity concerning how a subject might be related. There are distant cousin matches in all four quadrants. There's a lot of shared DNA everywhere. The presence of a lot of endogamy may not help to easily resolve many individual family line queries, but having a systematic process to review your matches could at least help to explain unusually high centimorgan matching results. Now we'll pull a lot of what I've been speaking about all together. Here is my cousin Anita. I evaluated her against my siblings, and in the case of my sister Renee, I got no match at all. Looking at my brother, he's got a 7 centimorgan match with her, so perhaps we're starting to get a little traction using this sibling superkit approach. Looking at another sibling, we find another match, 6.5 centimorgans, a little less in amount than what my brother had, but still a match. Moving to the next sibling, yet again, another match, 6.1 centimorgans, but even less than in the previous instance. And then rounding things out, my small match of 6.1 centimorgans concludes this phase of sibling review. So 4 out of 5 siblings matched, all small segments. At this stage, we don't even know where the matches occurred, which chromosome, which exact location. Questions, questions, questions. Without a chromosome browser, we may never know. But the advantage we have with Anita is that Anita is swimming in more than one lake. She is also in GEDmatch. Because of that, we can upload her raw DNA data out of Ancestry and load it into GEDmatch, where we can study it under a microscope, if you will. Play around with it under better circumstances. See what else we can find out. We can't go to the chromosome browser in Ancestry, there isn't one. But again, by moving to GEDmatch, we now can further evaluate this situation. So looking at Anita, we find those small matches that 3 of my siblings had, they are all triangulating on the 9th chromosome. My sister Renee did not match at all, and that held true to form in GEDmatch as well. And then I had a nearly 7 centimorgan match on the 6th chromosome. Might this be an outlier or a false positive? It's hard to know at this point why I didn't match up with my other siblings on the 9th chromosome, but we'll move on. Here's a thought. Let's supercharge the analysis. Let's study the available aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, etc. There's a lot we can throw at any given situation in order to find out more information. So let's do that. In this case, I was able to find a maternal first cousin, Joseph, who matched Anita as well. He had an 18 centimorgan match on Ancestry, so that's a stronger match than any of my siblings had with Anita. Again, because we're able to move to GEDmatch and look at this in more detail, we can find in looking at this in GEDmatch on the 6th chromosome, Joseph and Anita share a 19 centimorgan match. That's the strongest match we currently have regarding this relationship. And lo and behold, it's also a triangulated match with what earlier appeared to be an outlier match with me on the 6th chromosome as well. So we now can see the bigger picture. We've got a strong match with Anita on the 6th chromosome. We've got 3 siblings on the 9th chromosome matching her as well. And so we're able to see the fuller picture because we're able to move this into GEDmatch and see her in a more comprehensive way. So that's kind of a good news story and a happy ending. We were able to get good information out of what initially appeared to be just a 6 centimorgan segment match to begin with. And we were able to also determine through this process that our cousin Anita is a distant match to us on my mother's side of the family. We'll come back to this point. Now, let's go to Africa. I'd like for you to meet my distant cousin, Lydia. She's from Nigeria, and you will note that this is just a 6 centimorgan match to me. At this point, we could ponder, 6 centimorgans, very small, could be a false positive, might be worth just tossing this one out. Who's to say what you really have here? Fortunately, because of having sibling summation methods in my toolbox, I was able to evaluate Lydia against all of my siblings. And in doing that, I found that she matched a second sibling, my sister. So again, more goodness is coming out of this as we move along. I was able to contact Lydia's son, Toloranju, who manages her Ancestry account, and he agreed to load Lydia's information into GEDmatch so that we could see her chromosome data and get more information. And we found that in looking at Lydia in the GEDmatch, that she was a triangulated match to us on the 16th chromosome. So again, a small match initially came into view, but we were able to look at it out of Ancestry and into GEDmatch and see it in a more useful form. So this is a pretty good news story so far in terms of starting to get more information on Lydia. Her son, Toleranju, told me a lot of information about the family. Again, I was able to get in touch with him via phone. So this was almost kind of like a Kunta Kinte moment, if you will, having this discussion. This is a picture of his parents, to include Lydia, when the couple was married in Lagos, Nigeria, some years ago. So one of the things he wanted, and I wanted this as well, was that we knew we had a match, but we didn't know if the match was on my mother's side or my father's side. I said, let me go back to the drawing board and do some additional digging to see if anything else could come out of this. So the research question at this point seeks to resolve if Lydia is a paternal or maternal match. So we were able to go back to JetMatch once again, where we got more discovery, where we have more discovery opportunities. And lo and behold, that previously discovered small 6 centimorgan match that I had with my cousin Anita comes back into play in a big way, because Anita is also a distant cousin match to Lydia. So we were able to evaluate them in JetMatch in terms of people who match both kits, and got a readout on a number of folks who fell into that category, including a person named Rosalind. So in evaluating Rosalind's information in more detail, we found that Rosalind was a triangulated match with my sister and I, all on the 16th chromosome as well. So that was the final piece of the puzzle that allowed us to confidently close the loop regarding this question. So we were able to use a 6 centimorgan match with our distant cousin Anita to later hone in on Rosalind and create a situation where we were able to determine that Lydia is a maternal match in our distant past. And we were able to use a maternal first cousin and a 6 centimorgan distant match to help finalize that assessment. In talking with Toleranju, he told me that his family was from Idowani in the Yoruba tribal region of Nigeria. So again, we're now getting all of this information, this specific information, all triggered by a series of small 6 centimorgan segments. African Americans and African cousins can in fact be reunited by using variations of this deep research approach I've just described. Having a tried and tested process in place is a critical initial step in order to have a repeatable chance of making these kinds of discoveries. Autosomal, mitochondrial, and Y DNA all team together, coupled with big data, lots of DNA from lots of relatives, can significantly help push your obtainable distant family discoveries further and further back in time. Because of placement of this Nigerian link within our family tree, Anita links to us via our Smith family line, which places our common ancestry potentially along our family's mitochondrial line. So the possibility exists along our mother's line, using a combination of mitochondrial and autosomal DNA testing, along with other compelling evidence, to be able to at least consider the Yoruba tribal people of Idowani as being our family's mitochondrial roots, tracking us back in time thousands and thousands of years. I mentioned earlier that it was like having an Alex Haley Kunta Kinte moment when Toleranju and I were able to speak over the phone. It would be hard to top that moment in my genealogical research journey, unless, of course, I could one day also meet him face to face, which in fact we did last October via virtual technology. I'll end where I began. You young African, we found you.